Welcome to today's episode of me reviewing highlights. This is where I review highlights from different books, articles, tweets, and everything I've been reading. Mostly books. I try to avoid everything else. So, let's get started. The first one we have today is remote not distant. Intentionally designed cultures not only increase employee engagement but also produce stronger business results. Both science and common sense tell you that a positive workplace culture creates a positive business impact. Research shows that organizations with healthy workplace cultures outperform weak or toxic ones. It's mostly factual. The key phrase over here, intentionally designed cultures, is referring to things that we have been talking about since some time. Even yesterday, in fact, about culture that. What was the quote yesterday? Anyway, so let's talk about intentionally designed cultures. Um, Cultures develop whether you want it or not. It's basically a set of behaviors. I think that's what we talked about yesterday. It's just a set of behaviors, and you repeat the set of behaviors, it becomes culture. But if you don't aim for a particular culture, you can just uh, uh, lapse into something that you never intended to. Because we rarely control our actions. We don't really control each and every action. Especially if we have no reason to, which is why the intentionally designed culture comes into play over here. So if you're intentionally thinking that, okay, this is the culture we want to create, and we know that we are going to create it by a set of behaviors that we want to demonstrate and that we want to enforce, that's when you start working towards intentionally designed culture. And that's when you have a culture that you want in an organization, in a team, in your team, and so on. So yeah, the rest of the highlight is pretty factual. It's like it says, researchers indicate that healthy workplace cultures outperform everything else. Moving on, mind for numbers. Diffuse mode insights often flow from preliminary thinking that's been done in the focused mode. The diffuse mode must have clay to make bricks. Uh, so diffuse mode refers to the time when you are apparently not doing anything. It's the time when you're out on a walk, or when you're just staring into nothing, you're daydreaming. That's really the diffuse mode thinking. It's not really, it's the opposite of focused mode thinking. So when you're focusing on something, like I'm focusing right now in talking to this camera to you, that's focus mode thinking. But whereas if I'm just staring into the monitor or staring into the wild, that's diffuse mode thinking. Or if I'm out on a walk, that's diffuse mode thinking as well. So the insights that appear in diffuse mode, they flow from preliminary thinking done in the focused mode. So there is always this interleaving that's required, or sometimes the interleaving happens naturally. You're working on a hard problem, and then you have to give up. You're going out for a walk, or you're just going to take a break, and when while you're taking the break, suddenly you have that that wave, that brain wave, that okay, oh, this is the solution. That's how it's meant to happen. It's like, we commonly think of this as coincidence, that we were out and we suddenly got the inspiration. But that's how it works. That's how our brains work. Our brains, when we're focusing on something intently, we are narrowly shining our focus, or like imagine a narrow beamed flashlight. And it's like we're just looking at that, nothing else. But in diffuse mode thinking, we have widened the search area, and now brain is doing what it's best at, the building patterns and stuff like that. So that's the diffuse mode versus focus mode. But like this highlight says, that focus mode is also important over here. It's not just that, okay, you can always be in diffuse mode and you are productive. That of course doesn't happen. Moving on, get it done. It's a long one. An experimented an experiment we conducted with our MBA students showed us that people are willing to spend more overall to avoid spending anything on a means, as many of us do to avoid shipping fees. In our experiment, we auctioned an autographed book by the prominent economist Richard Thaler, which is something our MBA students would treasure. The average bid for the book was $23. We next actioned a tote bag, which contained the same autographed book, to another similarly enthusiastic group of students. While the students were technically bidding on a bag, the deal was economically superior given that the highest bidder would win both a bag and a book. To our surprise, the average bidder was willing to pay only $12, significantly less than what bidders were willing to pay for the book alone. I think this is like, it's long, it's elaborate, it explains everything. I don't really need to add anything. I'll just say that it's funny that this happens. It's so easy that we get lost in um, really, we don't really think about these things, that okay, we are actually buying the book. If you just buy the tote bag, and we do that surprisingly often. For example, if there is a product on Amazon and it costs $40 with free shipping, we're more likely to buy that compared to another, like the same or similar product which is $30 plus $5 shipping. So like that would be a better deal, $35 total. That would be a better deal, but we're still more inclined to buy the thing that is $40 with free shipping because like of the free shipping label, or how basically all the offers work. That you mark up an item, like if it's a $40 item, you mark it up to $100, then give a 50% discount, sell it at $50, and like people would still buy it. But if it was like originally marked at $40, people are not likely to buy it. So yeah, that's just how our brains work. Moving on. Drive. If someone's baseline rewards aren't adequate or equitable, her focus will be on the unfairness of her situation and the anxiety of her circumstance. You will get neither the predictability of extrinsic motivation nor the weirdness of intrinsic motivation. You will get very little motivation at all. The best use of money as a motivator is to pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table. It's There is a lot of context behind it. If you're familiar with drive, or if you're familiar with the concept of motivation and incentives, we have talked about that many times in these episodes. So then it's pretty apparent over here. The idea is that um, money doesn't matter unless it's isn't adequate or equitable, like the first line says. Because if it isn't adequate, then all the focus is on the money. It's because of the unfairness of the situation, or just because of the anxiety of the situation, because it isn't enough. If it is not equitable, it is the unfairness of the situation. And like that is a more stronger detractor than all the benefits you see from motivation, extrinsic or intrinsic. So the extrinsic motivation in terms of bonus and everything, that doesn't matter if if the money isn't adequate in the first place. The baseline, the like for example a base salary. So that has to be enough, adequate enough. That has to be fair, so that the issue of money is off the table. And then you start talking about, okay, avoiding extrinsic motivation, focusing on intrinsic motivation, and that's what leads to high performing results. It can, we can keep talking about it, but I feel it's like a very lengthy topic. So I'll move on for now to getting things done. A big problem is that your mind keeps reminding you of things when you can't do anything about them. It has no sense of past or future. That means as soon as you tell yourself that you might need to do something and store it only in your head, there is a part of you that thinks you should be doing that something all the time. Everything you have told yourself you ought to do, it thinks you should be doing right now. That's a weird thing about our minds, and the system, the getting things done system. I think that's kind of focused around freeing your mind. If you're familiar with the GTD system, if you're a practitioner, or if you're just familiar with it, you know this, that the GTD system is all about putting everything out of your mind into a system, a reliable system. It could be a notebook, to-do list, app, whatever it is, as long as it's reliable. And by reliable, I mean that you trust it, that you're going to use it. You trust it that wherever it is safe, reasonably safe. I mean, of course, we know that nothing's always safe, but yeah, reasonably safe. That you know that when I'm putting it over here, this will remind me when the time comes. I don't need to worry about it anymore, and that is when you free up your mind. And that's what the whole system is. So that's the author is describing the problem with our minds not able to let go of things. Moving on. Originals. Being undermined and supported by the same person meant even lower commitment and more work missed. I don't have the context here, so I'll just move. Team topologies. The simplest platform is purely a list on a wiki page of underlying components or services used by consuming software. If those underlying components and services always work reliably, then there is no need for a full-time platform team. This book is talking about four different kinds of teams, and we'll just talk about platform because that's what the highlight mentions. And it makes a point that the platform team is a team that's going to simplify all the dependencies for the other teams, for the stream-aligned teams mainly. That it simplifies all the dependencies, and the simplest platform is like just like a list or a wiki page that contains all the services, and if they all work reliably, then you don't really need a full-time platform team because you're just using the services. They're always reliable. You don't need somebody to keep monitoring it or adding a wrapper around it or something like that. Sometimes the services may be reliable, but you still need to add a wrapper around it so that they're consumable by the stream aligned teams. So it's like a deep discussion. For example, I mean, do we need a wrapper? Why can't we find a better service that's more suitable to your needs? And there are many reasons why you can't. Even if you can find one, maybe you can't go there. Many reasons over there. So it's a very complicated discussion. But this quote is making the point that at a simplest level, it's just a list of wiki page, a list of all the services that your software is using, and of course, in practicality, teams are much more complicated than just a wiki page. Moving on, $100 million offers. We must endeavor to keep our supply and satisfaction of desire under the demand that we're able to generate. This maximizes profits and keeps desire ravenous in our customer base. This is the real key to never going hungry. So it's a market tactic. It's like economics, as most people say that it's like just the interaction between supply and demand. So if you're able to control your supply, you can artificially inflate demand. That happens, like that's mostly what this book is about. How you control the supply so that you can generate the demand. And of course, like this book is talking about what works. It's not talking about ethics, or it's not talking about um, fairness in business practices. And that's a conversation I feel we should be having. But this book is not about that. So this highlight is just for the sake of its own. So let's move on. I think this is from an article. Company team self. Rigid adherence to any prioritization model, even one that's conceptually correct, like mine, that prioritize the company and team first, will often lead to the right list of priorities, but a team that's got too little energy to make forward progress. It's not only reasonable to violate correct priorities to energize yourself and your team, modestly violating priorities to energize your team en route to a broader goal is an open leadership secret. Leadership is getting to the correct place quickly. It's not necessarily about walking in the straightest line. Gleefully skipping down a haphazard path is often faster than purposefully trudging. So, I think I should read this article again because, like, this is coming back to me. I'm not really remembering it very clearly. It's talking about how you set priorities and how there are many different factors what goes into a prioritization model. So one over here is company team self. That's a prioritization model. So the first priority is company, then the second priority is team, and the third is yourself. And it's also, this particular highlight is making the point that sometimes you have to override the prioritization model. For example, it says over here, modestly violating priorities to energize your team en route to a broader goal is an open leadership secret. So your prioritization model may say something, but then there are many reasons why you may want to violate it for the time being, and that is your discretion as a leader of the team. You know that, okay, what your team needs right now, and sometimes the model captures that, and most times it doesn't, which is why you as a human being are going to make that call that, okay, this is when it's right to ignore the prioritization model. So yeah, that's about it. I think the rest of the highlight is pretty evident, and I think it's worth reading. I'll link to the article in the description as always. The last one is from Tribe. While a few advocates would have you believe in the basic evil of extrinsic incentives, that's just not empirically true. What is true is that mixing rewards with inherent interesting, creative, or noble tasks, deploying them without understanding the peculiar sense of motivation, is a very dangerous game. We talked about incentives and um, compensation and everything earlier. Motivation, how it plays with motivation, and um, it's really talking about the dangers of the extrinsic incentives. Things like monetary bonus or a financial incentive of some kind. It's mixing rewards with a task which is inherently interesting, creative, or noble, and mixing it with an external reward. It's a very dangerous game, and experiments after experiments have shown that to us, that this in the long term it just creates damage. So yeah, that's about it. I feel I've discussed this in the previous highlight as well from Drive, and we have been talking about this many times. So I'm just going to move on, because I think we're hitting 16 minutes mark as well, which I'm thinking that that means it's the end of the video today. It's been a busy week, but I'm happy. Like 4 days this week, I've been able to do this. Like I said before, probably next week I'll be taking a break. Next 2 weeks, in fact. So I might have a video tomorrow, but if not, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Then take care. Bye.